Okay, so thank you all. It's Dvora Kresniansky from Adai Ad, and once again, we are continuing our marriage, Ready for Marriage series. I want to thank the Crown Heights Jewish Community Council and Ruchama Klotman from Mask for being a big part of this. And before we get into the topic, Ruchama, can you talk a little bit to what Mask does for the community?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Dvora, for putting together all these wonderful trainings and topics. Most important one.
Okay. So I don't know, Ruchama, did we lose you? We're not hearing you.
We can't have anyone better to address it than Dr. Tepfer. So I'd like to thank you, Dr. Tepfer, for being on with us. Mask we're in our 25th year, and we're 117,000 families. We are a referral organization for all mental health, including addiction, all ages, all stages. And we have referrals for therapists. I'm a Nefesh board member. We have over 900 from therapists available through Nefesh as well around the world, and inpatient, outpatient programs, trauma for addiction. And maybe we'll have Dr. Tepfer talk about his program for a moment as well. We also have a radio show Thursday nights on the Zev Brenner line, 6:20 a.m. on the radio dial, and talklinecommunications.com. You can listen to all the previous shows on massparents.org. So thank you again, Dvora and Dr. Tepfer, for being on with us tonight.
Thank you, Ruchama. So tonight's topic is internet use, as a euphemism, and marriage. And we'll be talking to how that impacts a marriage and what that means for people who are thinking about shiduchim, not so much in the marriage itself, Dr. Tepfer, but we're talking about for shiduchim. So first, talk a little bit to the work that you do in this field and in general, what you do for the mental health for the frum community.
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Ruchama, and thank you, Dvora, for honoring me and allowing me to be part of a special night, a topic that's so important, and just to be in the presence of individuals who are doing groundbreaking work for so many years. It's an honor to be a small part of this. And around 2008, 2009, my invitation and topic began where I had an individual who had just had his first child and came crying in the office, where he told me, he said, while my wife was giving birth, I wasn't there in the room. I was actually in my car downstairs. I said, okay, you didn't make it in time? And he said, no, I was there. He said, I was actually on my phone. He said, I'm so addicted to pornography, he said, that I was actually sneaking down because I thought I had a little bit more time. A true story. And I was watching on my phone, and then I came back and she had already delivered our son. And this was the beginnings when this was just starting to come much more to the surface as a problem. Technology was really beginning to be so accessible and so advanced, and I was lost and did whatever I could to read and speak and train myself at that point. And that's really how it was that story that pain and my ignorance at that point that pulled me into the topic of tonight. And the past 14, 15 years, I've been working in this field, sometimes exclusively or more, or it depends, sometimes more tangentially, but speaking on it, sitting with individuals, running groups, couples work. I try to work with it at pretty much every angle to try to help, because it really became such a central issue, not just something that comes up, but it's become, in the world of addictions, it's become, I would say, one of the most, or if not the most prevalent one, because of its accessibility and its affordability, its anonymity. There are many reasons for it. So I'm so happy that this topic is being discussed tonight for people who are before, who are thinking about relationships and thinking about the things that are so important, because this is one of them. So I'm so happy that this topic is being spoken about.
So thank you for joining us on the topic, because I know, like, we've spoken about this before, how, like, it's really an important topic, and we get so many questions from Bachram, from their mashpiyim or their teachers, and from girls who are dating. So I'm really glad that we're going to be talking about it just for an hour, but at least we'll cover some important points. So when we're talking about pornography, when we're talking about internet addiction, what are we talking about and what is it not?
Sure. Okay. So it's so important always not to overuse and not to underuse any terms and any to pathologize things that are not problems, but also not to whitewash or not to brush aside things that are serious and are real issues. And especially in this topic, in this area of internet and pornography, it's very common to see both. And I'll explain an example of each. I got a call actually on my ride home tonight from a distraught mother of it was an 8th or 9th grade girl who found the iPad, and she had gotten around it and was watching things on YouTube, and they were clips from movies, and just she have to be worried that there's a major issue. And I think that all of us who are parents, all of us who, some of you who are now going into dating, it's not that far away from teenage years. There's a healthy, not that we want to advocate for it, but there's a healthy understanding that teenage years are about some form of curiosity, some form of exploration, some form of pushing boundaries, not for all children, but for many children. And we have to normalize that and understand that that's a part of that stage of development, and that's appropriate. We don't have to, pathologize it, catastrophize it, magnify it so much. It has to be addressed with good parenting, and but not everything is an addiction, and not everything is the end of the world. And I think that a healthy way to look at that is it something part of exploration, part of curiosity? Maybe even it's done even that they got some sort of information or some sort of suggestion from someone else. That type of thing is again part of normative, healthy entering into adolescence and adulthood, young adulthood. And I think that when we cross over from the normal into more of an issue where there can be problems, is when it crosses over into a more addictive or compulsive behaviors. I think then we're dealing with a whole different set of characteristics. Then we're dealing with, we'll see more of obsessiveness towards something, meaning seeking that situation or that behavior as a pattern. If they're creating situations where you can have access, it's not just exploration anymore. Here it's really being sought after. It can even be, despite a lot of times consequences, that there were threats, or they'll get in trouble, or they're putting themselves in risk, for being thrown out of this or being caught by that, and they don't care. And there's, even if they've tried to stop because they don't feel good about it, and they go back to it. And then, it gets even more intense because there's a tolerance, like it has to, go to the next level of watching different things and pushing the envelope. Right? Instead, these two things are very, very different. They feel different. One is doesn't have the pattern to it, the escape energy, the seeking it out. The other one does. And of course, there's a gray area in between. But I think that those are two different things, and they have to be treated and looked at two very different ways. And so that's something we can't again overuse the term. Let's say there's some sort of addiction, nor can we underuse it. And I'll give examples of that. So often this may lead to further conversations, later on with questions. But I want to throw it in now. I've heard this very often. Oh yeah, he's just a guy, or he's just a typical person, or he's a single guy, and there's no outlets, so what do you expect? And it'll go away when he gets married. And as far as I'm aware, in almost every case that I've dealt with, I hate the word saying the word every, but I want to say 99%. I've never seen engagement, relationships, marriage fix this issue when it's an issue of that second category. That's it's the opposite. It'll the added stresses of a relationship and of family life and that transition, it might go away for a short period of time. You might have a honeymoon period, but that's not what ever cures this issue. Because you have to realize this is not about sexual frustration. When it's something that's a behavior that's being sought out in that pattern type of way, it's filling a whole different need. It's filling a void or an emotional need or wounds or deeper things that this person doesn't have other skills to deal with, and so therefore it's a misunderstanding of what really was going on. It's not going to be fixed by a marriage. It's not going to be stopped by now having a sexual partner. That's not what's going to address it.
Thank you. So someone's question is, does it matter to know exactly where you fall on the continuum?
Oh, so I most definitely. And the reason it matters is because, see, when we're dealing with exploration or curiosity, nothing to do with a pattern, nothing to do with compulsivity or even addiction, then the person has to understand what the behavior is, why it is not a habit to start developing, and a conversation, sometimes a discussion, and it can even be sometimes in a school, it can be with a rabbi, it can be with a therapist, briefly understanding, or it can be the person themselves realizes. But when we're dealing with category 2 or further on the continuum of compulsivity, addictive behaviors, much more intense, a whole other level of work is needed. Then you're dealing with deeper work. Usually has individual therapy. There's usually a group component, whether it's meetings, whether it's a group work, and all sorts of levels that are needed depending on the case. So yeah, it's very important to understand what we're dealing with. Sure.
So again, talking about someone who's seen pornography, so that it's in their mind, versus someone who's actually addicted, and the whole hiding and lying and all of that. So can we talk to how the both of them could impact the marriage?
Yeah. Oh, sure. So are we talking about, impact the marriage, that this went on prior to the marriage happening, or it's going on while the marriage or while the relationship is happening? I think those are two very different things. And let's, maybe I'll try to address all of them. Prior to a marriage, I think that for 2022, for some person to have seen some form of inappropriate pornography at some point in their years prior to getting married, I think that's sadly or unfortunately, that's the reality. And I don't think that's going to be a problem for a relationship. If this person, when he was 17 years old, was curious or saw something, I think I'm not justifying it. I'm not minimizing it, but I'm just saying that's. I think you can move on and move forward and have a healthy, happy, loyal, and honest relationship moving forward. I think that then there's a whole other trajectory, which is during the adolescent years. It's not just that there was exploration or curiosity, but this person, was in a home where he had access, and through that, found a way to escape, and that escape meant being able to access pornography. And many people tell me stories where that was their daily or nightly thing for hours during their entire high school years. And then maybe they went to Israel and took a break, but then came back, and every time they were home for the summer, it was hours, and it was late at night, and that was their go-to. And something like that, does that affect a marriage? It affects it immensely. I mean, one of the things that happens during those adolescent years is we learn we emotionally mature, right? By dealing with life, by dealing with the things that come up in our lives, the difficulties, and we have to feel them and face them and talk it through and work it out. We mature. When you have something that becomes your escape and go-to, what we see is that just even from an emotionally maturing part, there's an underdevelopment of a person's ability to just handle things, because I've always numbed, I've always run away, I've always just escaped and gone to some other behavior, with my boredom, to deal with my loneliness, to deal with my sadness, to deal with my anger. I just numbed and escaped. So a lot of times there's, number one, emotional underdevelopment to be addressed. And when we're talking about tens, dozens, hundreds of hours of watching pornography, what that does to the arousal template of a forming brain, it introduces such an unrealistic, self-centered, objectified view, a distorted view of what sexuality is, then what reality is. It's unfortunately understimulating for these people very often. It's onerous, because I'm not used to the effort of the context of a relationship that's needed for intimacy. It never required that of me. It was a very self, one-sided experience, and bringing all of that into an intimate relationship is such a poor education, and more than that, it's a distorted one. So to be able to shift out of that after so many experiences of that is also an uphill battle, a very unfortunate situation that people find themselves in. So that distortion of all of intimacy is also what they're going to bring into a relationship. Now, I'm not making it hopeless. I'm just stating I want to answer your question in terms of we'll talk about hope.
Definitely, we have to go to the hope part.
In a minute. I don't want to make it, but I want to now emphasize the heaviness and the severity of the consequences for many people of trying to climb out of that. Okay.
I definitely want to go to the hope piece. I also want to talk to because it's so heavy and so important. It's important not to just dismiss it or not share it or hope that it's just going to go away. Now that I have someone who I love and I care for and loves and cares for me, it just doesn't just go away on itself.
No,
we've never seen that.
No. Where we're dealing with a pattern, where we're dealing with addictive behaviors, what we'll see is that if it's not really addressed, if the underlying issues, because what's really going on with anything that's at a level of addiction is the behavior is really, really the very tip of an iceberg. There's an entire emotional world underneath that's really causing the behavior to express itself. And just like, right, if you see the that little tip sticking out of the water, right, but you know that there's miles going deep down beneath the surface of the water, and that's what these behaviors, any addiction, but we're talking here about internet pornography. If that's such a pattern and that was a go-to, we're dealing with other issues, and often there's whether there's traumas, whether there's social or relationship issues, whether there's emotional stuff that's being solved by this behavior, that has to be looked into and solved and addressed. And if it's not, then it's going to rear its head again. Can it change forms and go into? These days, I don't even see it going into other addictions in its place. It's only because pornography is just so accessible. It almost always stays with that. That's what I've found.
So easy, accessible, and it's affordable and anonymous and cheap, and it's like
yes. Like I think a phrase is, what used to take time, effort, and money to get now takes time, effort, and money to stay away from, because you have to wait online in some or office or organization, whether it's Tag or whether it's some other place, and you're paying money and spending your time and effort to block this content. That's really how you talk about accessibility. It's not even, we don't even have to go after it. It's like it can chase after you with this pop-up or this ad or this news site. It's there chasing us. That's really I think I don't want to misquote it, but they say over from different rabbis that what our great grandparents in their entire lifetime saw in their shtetl, in one afternoon, one of us is exposed to more, and I think that's correct, and I think that's correct. That's so, and that's I want you to, we should say this. I really think, and that's the greatness of our generation, because to be challenged in such a way like we are. I'm going off topic, but you have to realize then obviously we're equipped to rise to the challenge. It's not always easy, and we're not always perfect, but to be trusted with such a challenge, and we're facing a lot, and to our credit, we're trying our best.
Okay. So let's talk to the hope. So someone recognizes themselves in this situation, and it's not, and they recognize that it's not only curiosity, that they recognize themselves somewhere on the continuum, the compulsivity or addiction. Let's talk to the hope. What the hope that yes, you can overcome it, but what is the work that has to be done?
Yeah. So listen, I'm only doing what I'm doing the past bunch of years because of the inspiration, and because of the hope and the miracles and the transformation that I'm able to witness over and over and over again. Often I'm the same day, or like one after the other, I have someone that is 2 or 3 years down the road, and they're just doing so wonderful, and their lives are changed. And then I'll have someone who will come in, who literally is there for the first time, and they're just like, they've been in this thing for 3, 4, 5 years, this habit. And I'll without saying the name of that other person, I say, there are people that have walked this before you, many people, and have walked out of this, and have and just with their heads high, and with the dedication, with the work that it takes. There's not just hope. There's a path forward that many have trodden and developed what has helped them, and it's not a mystery anymore. What helps. Each person has different things, but we have the some of the key ingredients that are there, and if you're willing, not just to put a band-aid, or not just to to take an aspirin or a Tylenol, like to work with it very slowly, but if you're really willing to do like second order change, like the deeper stuff, then you will succeed if it means enough to you, and you see that. Not that it has to be perfection, but that there's tremendous change. I see it daily, so it's there. What would I say are some of the key elements? Well, I mean, I would say the word, I guess, the motivation to change. I can be very motivated for the person to change. Their wife could be motivated, their kala, their fiance, their parents. Unless that individual understands themselves very clearly, the consequences in their own lives to what is going on, and they stop the rationalizations, the minimizations, the shifting blame, the excuses, the denials, whatever each one of these things is a topic in and of itself. But once they take ownership and they say, the one I'm hurting is myself, and I desperately want this to change, then that's the doorway, and sometimes that doorway itself takes some time for that person to really own that, but that's crucial. There's a couple of other things. All addiction, especially what we're talking about tonight, thrives on secrecy. And one of the phrases that comes from SA is lust hates light. And it's this individual shifting from that world of secrecy, of isolation, and to the world of connecting, to the world of honesty, to the world of opening up about these behaviors, about urges, about when they're being triggered. So sometimes it's with other group members, or from people who are in the fellowship with them, or sometimes with a therapist, or sometimes with a partner that they're set up with. Many different ways of doing this. They have to get out of the isolation, because addiction loves that. And some people want to say, well, I the shame. No, I don't want to. So that's a key piece with all addiction, especially with this. It's to bring it out into the light. And so many of them, for the very first time, by working with a therapist or working, with a group or meetings, that gives them a platform to finally do that. So those are some of the key starting points that are I would say essential to start this work. But when those ingredients are really owned, then people are ready.
So to think that you might be able to do this on your own, like I'm really motivated, I know that is that possible? So you're mentioning accountability, you're mentioning group, you're mentioning, when you mention fellowship, we'll just talk to what fellowship means for a second.
Okay, so fellowship can mean, well, often, not always, not in every case, but often, what's helpful to people is to join one of the 12-step fellowships. There are a few of them that are out there specifically for internet pornography. One of the most common ones in the Orthodox community is SA. It's for various reasons that SA became a comfortable place for religious Jews, and they have them in every religious neighborhood, all times of the day. Anonymity is very important in any fellowship, and so a person should feel comfortable and safe that they can go there. And their confidence will be kept. And when you join, you enter a place where there's a group of people. There's no therapist that's running it, but there's a group of people. There's usually a leader of the group who has already been there and been sober for a while, and will welcome you in. And there's sharing that goes on. Often people will go daily or a few times a week. You get a sponsor when you're in one of these meetings, and that person really holds your hand in the process. He's someone who's further on down the road, And that fellowship, there's usually a literature, they'll read a white book, and they will share. They will also have the ability to connect with other fellows of the fellowship between meetings, calling people throughout. People will call their sponsor daily. Then you can do step work with the sponsor, where they'll usually follow the 12 steps. That's more of a spiritual pathway of accountability, of getting to the bottom of the spiritual void that is at the heart of AA and SA, many of these 12-step fellowships, as being a big part of the cause of addiction. So that's in a nutshell the role that fellowship plays for a lot of people. Are there individuals that don't connect, that try, or that's not an option for them? Yes. And is there a path forward for them without that? Yes. Yeah, there are certain individuals that between therapy, sometimes I'll go to a group that's not a 12-step group, just group therapy for this can be helpful. Some people don't want any of the group element. They'll only work with a therapist. It's case by case, it depends. But the thing, to answer your question, to do this alone, one of the definitions of addiction are the attempt to try and stop the behavior without success, and that means this person has done that, tried that, and it hasn't worked, and therefore at this point to try the same thing and expect different results this time is not very likely to work.
So it's get over, like you have to mention it to someone, like you said, the secrecy is a big piece of it.
Yeah,
and sometimes that's why people hesitate. For some people it's the cost of a therapist, but then we say that SA doesn't cost anything.
Right, correct. That's important to mention. SA does not cost. There are other organizations that are online. I don't like to advocate for one or the other. People have different opinions about different ones, but there are various tools that are out there different levels. I think that, just to emphasize this, I think that so much of this addiction is about isolation, that and the anonymity of it. That, to me, I think the essential component, one of the essential components, is showing up and expressing versus hiding. And I think that a lot of the recovery routes, even though they're convenient, but they keep that piece of it. They allow for the anonymity and for the isolation, and I just don't think that really gets to the root of what's really needed for change. So I myself push for face-to-face or a group piece to it, or meetings, or at some point of show up and to be able to share and talk as part of the recovery.
Now let's shift to shiduch dating specifically. So we can understand why people would want to be anonymous, because our shiduch system, as wonderful as it is, has some of this. Why should I go there if if someone has this addiction or someone has this behavior in their past? I can understand why someone would be anonymous, but it's not the way that we actually can overcome this. But let's talk to shiduchim. So should someone's history be shared during shiduchim, and at what point?
Yeah, sure. So this, I'm not a rav, I'm not a rabbi. There's a halacha question that I think people should ask. From a therapy standpoint, I can tell you my opinion, and leaving the first category we were discussing, where this person saw something once when they were this curiously, I'm leaving that out. If there was an issue, a serious issue, and this person really had to work through some sort of pattern of what we're talking about, where there was, the behavior was habitual, it was compulsive, it was addictive, and they spent time, and they went to a professional, and they worked this thing through at some point in their years, and we're probably talking about something that was a few years long, just by the nature of it. To to not mention that at all, is that something that's fair, that's honest to a spouse? So to me, I can't tell you how many situations, how many marriages with a spouse, let's say the wife, this was omitted and was not told. And what would this be like for our daughter? For it's. I know it's very tempting to give the green light to a person, say, "Oh no, it's not an issue now. Okay, fine, it's good," and I have all the confidence that hopefully he will do well. But to not even put it out there and allow that other person to make some sort of decision themselves that's informed. Yeah, I think something like addiction, since it's the relapse is so prevalent, and not because I'm making it hopeless, but it's just a part of the nature of it for many people. And it was a serious issue that was going on to me. It requires an honesty. Does it require the first minute? No, but there's whatever that turning point when things are getting beyond the initial few dates and going. Every circle is different. Depends on the fourth, the fifth date when people will say certain things. For a person to say, "Hey, I just want to say that Baruch Hashem, I'm doing well," and you can speak to the therapist. But when I was 18, or whatever, I 17, 18, I had these fears, and I worked through something like this. I'll be honest, this level of disclosure is often not done. But I think that when we're dealing with the intensity that we're dealing with, my humble opinion, my strong opinion would be to bring it up. But I think there's a halacha decision that people usually consult, and I let people follow the people who they ask. If a Rav would ask me, then the therapy view of it, and based on the trajectory or the reality of this type of stuff, how it plays out, I think that that there's what to share. I've also, I'm just going to put out there, even when people, I just had this. I had a different conversation this morning where this came up. Even the way people will ask a question, they'll often get the answer the way that they asked it. And I had a fellow just tell me today that he called one of the biggest gedolim, and is when he got married. And he said, "But I'll be honest with you." He told me this morning. He said, "The way I asked it, I really didn't give him a clear picture, because often it's like, oh, it's not an issue." It's really not an issue. It didn't come up once since you were 18 years old when you left that person. Not once. It was perfect since then. Yeah. So then it's already, there's the dishonesty already in how the question is asked very, very often. And then the answer is based on the dishonest question that was asked. Then there's a continuation of the dishonesty by the omission of it. And then this whole disease is built off of dishonesty, with isolation. So let's just continue it all until the whole thing explodes 6 months into the marriage when and that's I'm crying because these are stories that are happening, all the time. And it's no one, it's I don't want to. There's no one's fault because everyone meant well and means well, but that's what I'm talking about. It's there's a well-meaning tendency to see things in a positive way, which I get, but in this area specifically, it's so often is short-sighted versus what's coming down the pike, because then we're a year and a half and a baby into a marriage, and then there's a wife that just is distraught, and the whole these stories I can tell you, like they're just they're so cliched because they're so it's just so repetitive and so often and so much. So is there a way to avoid it? I believe that just a more honest approach. And then first of all, that honesty is so helpful for the individual themselves, starting a relationship in a more honest way. And then a person can make, no one will ever marry me then. The honesty doesn't chase everyone away. Sometimes the right person who's meant will hear that and be very impressed by the fact that there's a person that was honest, and we'll make a decision based on that. And we'll sometimes call the therapist that he worked with, and then sometimes feel okay. They may have something in their own background, or they may have a sibling or a parent that worked through something. They're very, very, sympathetic and understanding to something like that. So those are some of my thoughts, and I think people would have all different opinions. I'm just coming from my experience.
I also feel like sometimes if someone who worked through it is on the other side of the 12 steps, is a stronger person, I think it's a badge of honor to have worked through it.
100%.
But if it's and just like anything that's your story to tell, figure out how you work with somebody, whether it's a Rav or Mashpia coach, I like to drip the story, say a little bit. You don't have to say the whole thing. See how you feel about how they react, and then you can add more of the story. But it's your story, and I mean personally, I think that it's a badge of honor to have gone through and be on the other side. The challenge is when someone is still in the middle, and that comes to lead to my next question: how long should someone have been in recovery before they should be dating for marriage?
Sure. So I'll give you the standard amount of time is, they say there should be a 6 month, a minimum of a 6 month period of sobriety, which means the person probably started that process much, much longer and is already at a stable place where they then have been really rock solid for already 6 months, and then to start dating after that. That's been the number that's out there. So I think that's a safe amount of time. That sounds pretty sensible.
And at the same time, when you mentioned a few times that it's she or he, because I understand pornography goes both ways, but we were just using one gender just because but it goes both ways.
Overwhelmingly, I would say it's overwhelmingly an issue with men, although it comes up much less frequently with women. I just think by nature, I think that the whole escaping through visual stimulation is I'm stereotyping, but it's just because the numbers, it's more common amongst men. With women, it does come up anecdotally. Almost in most of the situations, there's been sexual trauma that's preceded it with women, whereas with men we don't always see that. So there's just there's a difference with some of the characteristics and some of the things that bring them to it. But it can be the other way as well. Sure.
So then to the question. So you mentioned a few times that he could bring her to a therapist, or he would allow her to speak to a therapist. Sure. Of course, has to be allowed to speak because that's HIPAA. But if he goes only through SA, then there is no therapist. Is there worthwhile to bring in a therapist, at least for this little piece, so that
100%. And I've done that where an engaged couple come in and just or someone who's dating and will come in to just. I think that I've gotten also a few just girls who've come in and said, hey, I learned this, or my prospective, this person who I'm dating seriously shared this with me. I just want to understand what is sex addiction, or what is pornography addiction, and what is SA, and what does the future look like, for someone who's in SA, and how someone's supposed to know, and they get a picture of it, and sometimes it doesn't work for people. They hear it and they say, I hear it, I respect it, it doesn't fit me, and they have every right to say it doesn't fit them. And then other people are very impressed, and not just impressed, everyone can be impressed, but comfortable with that, with entering into that in a relationship. So just knowing what that is, that very often SA is a part of a person's life, moving forward. And sometimes that's a wonderful part of life. There's a place of honesty, a place of growth, a place where they're working on themselves and their character. Some people feel uncomfortable with the fact that this person is going to be involved in recovery. It's too unfamiliar to them, and it doesn't feel right. So then they should understand that.
Well, that would be another reason why you would have to share that, because you go to SA for life. I mean,
Sure.
forever.
Sure.
So
Sure. Many people.
where are you going every Thursday night?
Right.
To SA,
Right.
or you go
for
to
sure.
challenge?
Oh, and if someone's currently, in a fellowship, and then there's like, I don't think there's any question about the sharing of it. I think that the answer would be for sure. I'm talking about someone who, this is already a year or two out. They're, it's something that they worked on. They're not even currently involved in it. It's something that's, and even then, that was the case I was making, 5-10 minutes ago. But no question, if someone's actively now in recovery, that's something that needs to be brought up.
So is it a reasonable question for a girl to ask a bacher when she's dating about his history, and how would she word that?
She can ask whatever she wants, for sure, and those are good questions to maybe ask. How honest of an answer will she get is a separate question, but I think asking these type of questions, very, very, very directly, you're not going to usually get, so if this guy likes this girl and she's asking about this, I assume he'll either omit or minimize it. Unfortunately, if he's not, it wasn't honest enough to bring it up, like we were talking about. Why would he be honest enough to answer the question accurately? And there's I think in all the conversations, there are probably more savvy, subtle ways of bringing it up. If there's if there are comments that in different topics that are minimizations of like, oh yeah, guys do that, or like certain movies, and that there's other ways of sensing, does this person have a sensitivity, and like, oh, would you be comfortable watching that scene? Is that good? Like, or is that a normal thing for guys to? Yeah, everyone, you can I think in other ways you can try to pick up on is this person, and then I think getting a sense from that, asking directly, I just don't think that for many people you'll get the direct, honest type of an answer. That's my gut. I think you have to use other little antennas to sense that the sensitivity of a person, and the discipline of a person. There's I think other things that have to be more indirectly perceived.
Okay, so this question came in. Hold on, let me just find it. Oops, there you go. I sent it to you earlier this morning. Now
some of the questions, I remember you asked if there was other ways aside for SA.
Right, that was the question. Right.
Okay, right, and that's an excellent question. I think some hardcore 12-steppers would answer that question. Absolutely not. There's no other way. To me, I don't think you can ever say that there's only one path. There's only one way, and exclusively one way of dealing with something. For many people, SA is a lifeline, and it's super important, and it's the thing that made the biggest difference. And I suggest that for many people. I've met people over the years where that wasn't the right tool. It wasn't the right resource. It wasn't the right fit. It wasn't the right approach. And the therapy spoke to them, or the group spoke to them, or a certain intensive that they went to spoke to them, and that's what made the difference. So an accountability partner made a difference. I don't think that there can be one and only one route to getting better. So I think it's something that I often say, give it a try, go for a few meetings and see if it's something that speaks to you. And so often it's something that the person didn't want to do, and then once they got over that initial fear, they're the happiest people that they ever went. They made the biggest difference in life. That's most often the result. But there are people that they don't connect with that whole approach, and there are other things that end up being helpful.
This question also just came in. If someone is dating someone and he says, "I promise I'll stop for you,"
I don't say the word "stay far away." That's not the language that I would say is the most beneficial. I think more useful than that, or more effective than that, would be that I'm going to do the work that to say the word "I'll stop for you" is wishful thinking, but I'll address the problem because I realize that it's going to mess up a relationship. Oh, you want to address the problem, which will require, real commitment and real involvement, then there's a chance. They're very different, but just "I'll stop for you" is not, in my opinion, something I'd put money on.
And so if he says, "I'll do the work for you," and he's willing to do the work for you, but how long should they stop dating until it's 6 months? Or
I wouldn't want. I don't think it's a healthy thing to enter a relationship where a person is beginning this process and to make a transition. I don't think it's healthy for them. I think it's healthy for anyone to enter into a relationship at this unstable time where a person's trying to get this under control. I just don't think that it's the right time for him, for her to enter into an engagement and a marriage while all that's going on. There's more important work that needs to first be done. They can cut off, or they can maybe put the engagement or the commitment or the marriage should wait till this thing is addressed. Can they still casually talk or go out? Maybe there's a place for that, but to these transitions when something like this isn't settled is not a response.
so if let's say a bacher goes to his mashgiach and says, "I think I have this issue," so hopefully he's going to be fully forthcoming. Otherwise, he's not really asking a real question, like you said before.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very important. And I'm sure every mashpia and every mashgiach and every rav has heard this question, and you're not the first one or the second one to come with the question. So it's important to be forthcoming. And so someone who is actually not yet dating, so that's one thing, is like, don't start yet until you work it through. But someone who actually met at a Shabbos table, or however they met, now there is already a relationship that it kind of, there's one thing like don't start shiduch dating, but one thing, there's a relationship now that's already going. So so we said like,
I have to address this issue prior to getting engaged, or to me that's just essential. If you're talking about, let's say, before engagement, if they're seriously dating, and this person has an issue that's really going on, that hasn't been addressed, to move forward, I would say for her to move forward on this, and for him to move forward, it's just not. It's just not wise. What to say? We have to. You're starting a relationship with conditions that make a relationship impossible. So like I don't. That has to be settled.
The story came in that they met on their own. They and they recognized that the situation was going on, but she said that if she would tell her parents why she can't get engaged in the next 3 weeks, they would never let her marry him. But so now she's kind of feels like she's stuck. She doesn't want her parents to know about it. So it's a tricky place.
Yep, it is a tricky place. There's sometimes very practical issues that she has to decide how she wants to but to go forward, because she is just is really, you know, just I don't want to say the word risky. I would say the word really it's just very, very irresponsible and not advised. She's entering into the very likelihood of this not being something that's her dealing with this issue from the start and never getting settled. Many people why wouldn't she know what she's dealing with? Is this something that he can get a handle on? We'll get a handle on. I think that and for him also to have just the responsibility of a relationship while he's doing this recovery, I think is something that's it has to be. What is she going to say to her parents? That's a practical question that has to be worked through. But from a relationship standpoint, I think it's essential that they do not move forward with those type of conditions. I don't know what else to say.
That's right. It's uncomfortable versus risky or very difficult.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it's a weight question.
Yeah.
It's the now or the later. Like, which one do you want?
Exactly.
And later seems like it's going to be a much bigger issue.
Yeah.
Okay. So any final thoughts? We hit the end of the hour. Any final thoughts? And then Chama, please give the number to Mass. So anyone who wants to call out. And Dr. Tepfer also mentioned Arbor.
Right.
Oh, okay, sure. So a couple of resources. If you want something very, very simple, just to work on this issue, there's a book that was actually written for adolescents by a team of professionals and clergy, and it's called Fortify. It just is like a small little workbook that helps people who are struggling with pornography. Something called the Porn Trap, which is a little bit older of a work written in the probably the 15 years old, also a classic. There's a book, Sex Addiction 101, if we're dealing with addiction. It just introduces a person to the topic. For partners, there's a couple of books, Facing Heartbreak, Mending a Shattered Heart, just to, when you're on the other side of the relationship and this becomes an issue. So those are some of the tools. From the therapist standpoint, the therapists that really specialize in this are usually people who are CSATs, that's certified sex addiction therapists. They have a lot of experience in it, but many people who are KSACs and other addiction professionals also work in this if we're dealing with addiction. And then with relationships, so some of the marital therapists specialize in issues with infidelity, and those are things that people should have experience in. In terms of, you asked me in terms of Arbor. So Arbor is an IOP, an intensive outpatient center that I'm directing now in Brooklyn, where we treat trauma, we treat addiction, behavioral, emotional health. When people want and need that more intense, higher level than more than just once or twice a week, it takes an integrative approach where we do drama and art and yoga and biofeedback, neurofeedback, and get into IFS. And you have 8 to 10 therapists a week working with the group, and are able to really get to the core healing, where people, instead of going or needing to go far away, or people who've gone far away, to other rehabs, are coming back and want to transition into back to daily life. They can work, or they can be home with their kids. We have a women's track, we have a men's track, and people are able to do this deeper work or continue to do the deeper work while they're in their daily life. So that's what Arbor is all about. And Ruchama.
And the website?
Thank you very much.
The website is arborintensives.com.
Well, Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Dr. Tepfer. I do just want to mention that when I started MASK 25 years ago, I named it MASK to be able to, the community should take off their mask. People struggle with mental illness, and oneself needs to be able to take off their mask in order to get the help they need sometimes. And that would mean that if they're going to a fellowship, joining in a 12-step meeting, that everyone there is taking off their mask and trusting what goes on in the room stays in the room. So, you know, like you said about earlier, once you go and you become part of something, it'll make the journey so much easier. It is not instead of therapy, it's in addition to therapy. Don't think you're going to do it on your own and just go to a 12-step meeting and you can cure yourself. You must get to the bottom, the underlying issue that caused and created this addiction for whatever reason, whether it was boredom, whether it was trauma, whether you came upon it by mistake, but whatever the reason is that you're involved with it, you must see a professional, and always with good credentials. So feel free to call MASK 718-758-0400, and you can call us about referrals. I can give you Dr. Tepfer's contact, whatever it is you may need or want advice with, we could connect you with the right professionals. We only refer to licensed professionals. My website is maskparents.org. And again, I want to thank Deborah and Adai Ad and Crown Heights Community Council for collaborating and making sure these programs are available to the CLAL. So thank you both of you again.
Thank you.
Thank you,
both
Ruchama. Thank you, Dr. Tepfer. Can I throw in one more question that just came in?
Of course.
Doctor? So the question is, I listen to a lot of these types of, and they always point out some sort of trauma or something that pornography is coming to heal. Baruch Hashem, I don't have any traumas or things that I feel pornography is coming to heal. I've been watching since I was 12, and for me, it feels like I just feel good, and that's why I watch it. Is there something I am missing? Am I different, or am I just unaware of why I'm watching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it's such a it's an individualized question for that, you know, for that person. I'm answering offhand. If this person is watching since they're 12, there can be a lot of factors. Let me throw one in. Perhaps there isn't necessarily any negative consequence that this person is dealing with, is feeling, is facing in their life. See, this comes up a lot with any time we're trying to define something as an addiction. So if there's no negative consequence to that person, let's say the religious issue isn't something that bothers them necessarily so much, they're not in a relationship, so it doesn't affect any spouse. So they're doing something that doesn't fit even the criteria of addiction, because part of an addiction is I'm continuing this behavior despite the negative consequences. So one of the things I would ask that individual is, are there any negative consequences? If there aren't, so then we're not dealing with addiction. We're dealing with something that that person is going towards. I don't think that, I don't believe that that's the full answer to what's going on. I'm just putting that's one thing to think about in response. The other piece here, when you're dealing with that level of involvement, I don't know the hours and I don't know the frequency, the intensity, but we're dealing with a behavior here where you know, pornography is pretty much, it sounds radical, but the dopamine hit is almost on par with cocaine in terms of just the stimulation of the brain. when someone has gone to that regularly from 12 till however old that this individual is, whether they realize it or not, is that this behavior, no doubt, is something that's isolated them from other people. It's the way that they're dealing with things in their life. It's not just a recreational thing. If it has a high frequency, so this is what they do, what they go to at the end of their stressful day, or instead of, or in place of going out with friends, or I don't have this person to talk to, but in all likelihood, it's become that. And so
like a soothing mechanism,
right? So whether we can argue the chicken or the egg. There are cases where sometimes the behavior isn't so preceded by some sort of intense trauma. Especially we've seen this with pornography. But when the behavior becomes the go-to for so long, and then that creates its own complicated system in and of itself that affects life, if I'm answering it correctly. And it's important for that person to understand and appreciate that, especially if they want to have a healthy, connected life with a relationship with another person, with emotional depth to themselves. And I think that watching pornography, I'd make the argument, I don't think on that regular basis just isn't conducive, doesn't allow for an emotionally developed, connected person to other people. So are there cases where it wasn't so preceded by trauma? I think that there are cases. It's not always in response, but I think that the habit on its own is going to then create its own monster. And I think that to look at it honestly, there is always or almost always going to be consequences to that level of stimulation ongoing. That's going to become the unfortunate go-to, and that becomes the go-to. Then, like I said before, the depth and the richness and the strength of a human being doesn't become developed when I go to something that numbs me, instead of being built by the difficulties and the issues that I have to deal with on a regular basis in my life. Those are the friendships that I end up deepening and relying upon. Those are the skills within myself that I end up honing and delving into, because I feel a certain way about myself, and then I have to become a stronger person, a deeper person. If I'm constantly going there, then I'm going to lack in all of that. So it's sometimes in the reverse order. But I don't know if I'm answering that question, but whoever asked it, I hope that there's something that made sense or helpful. Okay.
and I'm sure
Somebody wrote thank you.
and I'm sure there are secrets involved in doing it.
Yes, that's for sure. Yeah, thank you, Ruchama, because then you've also developed a life of isolation and of secrecy that comes along with it, and that whole habit is going to then become a part of it. But yeah, and often a healthy person. I'm going to challenge. Everything was great and there's no trauma. There's something that doesn't sit right. Also, that from 12, that's become my go-to, for my entire adolescent years, and it comes along with everything that we're talking about, and there's no consequences and there's no guilty anything, whatever it is. But I had nothing, and I'm coming as a healthy. It doesn't add up either. And there are often things that a person, if they look, not that I'm trying to pathologize or trauma, or say that everything is about trauma. there's parts that a person may not appreciate that they've gone through, or things that they are just unaware of that would lead to that type of place to go to at 12. And that's also something that the person may need to look closer at. But I don't want to say for sure.
Professional would be the best bet.
Yes, because there's something that's doesn't, that's questionable about why that would feel so comfortable and okay for that long. That's what hits me.
Okay. And one more, but we can answer this one quickly. Everyone who does the work, they were cured, but are they cured from this? Or what's the percentage?
Or your money back, right?
Your life back.
Your life back. We mentioned before.
I always say it depends on the client, on the motivated client, and what their motivation level is.
Yeah.
So if they're really motivated and they do the treatment and they're committed to whatever the therapist, and they make up and they follow up with 6 months, a year, whatever it may be, and they're honest with their spouse about it, or their whomever they report to, then that is part of being successful. Being online, doctor, at a supermarket and seeing magazines sitting there while you're holding your eggs and your milk may be a trigger for them. But if they could come home and say, I felt uncomfortable, maybe I'll shop in another store and not go to that supermarket. It's hard for me, and speak about it is what can be very helpful. So the motivational level is so important.
100% motivation, and the humility to be able to follow the advice of people who are helping them, and to take ownership, not just that they're there because they're trying to get some person off their back or off their case, or some girl to get engaged with them or to stay married to them, but to take ownership and to really take responsibility and put it on their own shoulders. That's when people have those ingredients that we were talking about before, that makes for success. It really does. And it's hard to define, but I can almost, there's a feeling of a person who's ready to do this work and they succeed. And they may fall here and there in the beginning, but they go from they appreciate that change, and then you can tell right away, like, this is just sounding off. There's no ownership. There's just so much blaming, and it's others, and it's other, and it's not going to have the traction that it needs. So it's working with someone who can point that out to the person early on, and help them do the real work versus just getting people off their back and putting a Band-Aid on it. Okay.
So I'm sure someone who does the real work and is really humble and honest can really overcome this. And probably are stronger because they'll be humble and 100%. Honest.
That's
and self-aware.
And you mentioned this before, when you were talking about it. It goes for couples, it goes for relationships, it goes for individuals. Some of the strongest, and I say it, this type of struggle doesn't leave people, and it's like this with anything. Rucham, I think you can speak about this, with the families and the teens that struggle. This doesn't leave people ordinary, and I'll explain what I mean. To see the couples, the individuals, the couples that work through this stuff with what we're talking about, with honesty, create extraordinary relationships, because they're not we talked about the masks before. How often, our relationships, even, I'm not talking about the relationship, how many masks are people wearing? They're not going to say this, they're not going to open up about that. The couples that are honest about this stuff, what you find is if then everything else is a walk in the park, because, and I mean it creates such rigorous honesty, vulnerability, humility. Some people working these 12-step programs are really working on character, and giving to other people, and they're being honest each day, in a meetings, or and as a couple they've discussed and faced things, and their relationship,
a lot of respect goes to a next level.
It goes to the next level. So the potential here is enormous as well, and we know that with the level of the struggle and the overcoming of that is, we don't ask for it, we don't wish it upon the person, but that's something of a doorway to being extraordinary and really and greatness, and I see those couples all the time, and again, the level of their honesty, their connection, their respect for one another, when they put in the work and they've done this work, is really is beyond people who haven't needed to deal with this, and it's like that in many areas. Things that couples have and individuals have had to overcome when they do. That's this greatness. This greatness.
Devorah, I just want to reiterate the part of, if somebody is dating somebody and they say to them, "Oh, but we'll be married. You won't need it anymore because you're going to love me. I'm going to love you. It's going to be great." I mean, you really need to recognize that as pure denial, because they cannot control the other person if they're stuck on watching porn. The other person that they're dating really needs to do the work. So they shouldn't think, "Oh, we're going to get married. We won't have TV. We won't have a phone. It'll be fine. It'll go away." And I really shouldn't say just he, because on our hotline, we have a lot of she's as well. But just for conversation, I'm saying he.
Right. Okay, so thank you both.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tepfer, for this is very insightful.
I think that yes. I'll add an example of that. I've had I remember this. I was on a panel about this topic, and there were well-meaning rabbanim that at that point weren't as informed in this topic. And one of the things that in therapy they were recommending were people in recovery, abstinence period, where they got into a certain recovery and jumping into the pro, and the surgeon said it's her obligation to need to be available where she shouldn't have some time away from him, and that's what's going to make it impossible to recover if he doesn't have her to be together with. And what I'm trying to say is that there was putting some of the responsibility of recovering from any addiction, especially from pornography, from sexual addiction, onto the spouse, is feeding into the fact that there's this excuse or there's this blame that the spouse is either responsible or the cause. And we have to clarify, recovery is never going to be because the spouse is going to now be more available. We're dealing with addiction, and that means that the individual owns the full responsibility. And she has to know, like in every addiction, there's the 3 C's. She didn't cause it, she's not going to control it, and she's not going to cure it, but it's not going to be her. And any responsibility that she takes upon herself, to that extent, it takes it off of him. And that's really so much of the codependency, the co-addiction that we have to really clarify, and we fall into that. because the addict usually wants to muddy the waters with that, and then often the person that's the spouse of that has that characteristic in themselves anyways that enables that. So there you go. I didn't cause it, I can't change it. There you go. Well said. Okay,
Good way to end it.
So
right.
It's a good way to end it. Okay,
All right.
so
Thank
we
you.
went a little bit over, but it was important. Okay,
Important.
pleasure.
Right.
Thank you for doing
Thank
this, and it was a pleasure to be involved. Have a great
Thank
night.
you. Good
All the
night.
best,
Thank you.
everyone. Sure.
Right.